WhatsApp 457-2705. The sound of the nation, reaching you in every possible way.
You're listening to NBC Radio, the sound of the nation. We now bring you Teachers Talk.
And a pleasant good evening to one and all. Welcome to Teachers Charles, and I am your host for this evening's program. I am the PRO acting of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Teachers Union, and with me tonight we have Miss Juanita Headley. We have a very interesting program packed for tonight. I urge you to just sit back and listen and be ready to be blown away. Now, we normally would usually focus on things that are, based on teachers' issues and what is happening in and around the country facing teachers. However, tonight we're just going to shift gears a little bit because generally we need to be prepared as teachers for anything. And why not be prepared for a topic that, we may or may not necessarily know about. We need to be aware, just like we were dealing with one thing for the last year, COVID-19, and then we had to shift gears and deal with dengue, and then had to shift gears and deal with the impending, the effusive eruption of the Last volcano. Let's shift gears a bit and just deal with something else here. So let me allow my guest, Miss Headley, to introduce herself. Hello, Miss Headley. Good night.
Good night. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for having me. A few technical difficulties there, but I'm glad I'm unmute now.
Okay, great. So I was just asking you to introduce yourself to us. Tell us about Juanita Headley, and before we get deep into the meat of the matter tonight.
Most certainly, and thank you for having me here. Mm-hmm. My name is indeed Juanita Headley. I am a New York attorney. I am originally from London, England. My parents are from Jamaica. For around the last 6.5 years, I have been a licensed practicing attorney for the state of New York. However, as I am a British citizen, I do not have work authorization, U.S. citizenship, or a H-1B visa. Therefore, I provide free legal advice to those who cannot afford an attorney. I provide advice to those who are immigrants, homeless, including illegal immigrants, and also ex-convicts. I have a heart and passion for serving the marginalized, and as a result of that, for approximately the last 9 years, I have traveled around the world, thus here to 38 countries, but I have had the opportunity to bring my message of education and empowerment on the topics of human trafficking and child abuse prevention. I have also spent a lot of time volunteering in orphanages and safe houses with victims and survivors of abuse and trafficking. I'm a born-again Christian, and my faith in Jesus Christ is the driving force behind a lot of what I do, because I am simply pro bono, which means unpaid. I am not motivated by money, and in fact, for the last 6 months, tomorrow is exactly 6 months since I arrived. For the last 6 months, I have been here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and I've had the opportunity and privilege to share my message at schools, community centers, to some of the police, caregivers, parents. I've had the opportunity to educate and empower people in person and more recently via Zoom on this very important topic. Prior to that, I was working in the UK for a very short duration in domestic violence and also in human trafficking prevention. However, I really felt a calling on my life, so I quit my job on August 14 of last year, came to St. Vincent for the first time, and by the grace of God, I have had multiple opportunities to share this message. For me, as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse from the ages of 4 to 10 by my mother's first husband. Although I have not been trafficked by the grace of God, I pray that will never happen. Being abused, I have a bit of an understanding of what it is like to be a victim in such a capacity. And that is one of the main motivations behind what I do. A lot of people don't understand why it is that I have this vocation. I believe that every one of us has a purpose and a calling upon our life. And for the last 9 years, although I had paid jobs for a few months, this is my ministry. And as I said, tomorrow is in fact the last day that I'm due here in the country. But who knows, maybe a door will open for me to extend my stay to continue this very important work in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Okay, that's quite a lot for me to digest. And we will get back to you and your stay here personally. But indulge me if you wish, Miss Headley. Vincentians, as a culture, we generally love action-packed movies, right? And I remember seeing this movie, Taken 2, starring Liam Neeson. And in this movie, his daughter was abducted, kidnapped, I should say, by a group of guys. And they took her, I think, is across a border. And they basically drugged her up, and they had, I believe it's a kind of prostitution ring going, and they had her involved in that. I said that to ask this question. Is that basically what human trafficking is, or are there other aspects of it?
What I think is important to note is that, unfortunately, movies like Taken give people a false perception and understanding of what trafficking really looks like. I have not seen the movie Taken, and I have no desire to watch it for the mere fact that it confuses people. And unfortunately, that movie gives people the perception that movement is a necessary requirement for human trafficking. And therefore, when an article like Searchlight was written a few weeks ago, touching on the topic of trafficking, the comments underneath the article on Facebook were that, number one, I'm doing a thesis. Number two, I'm meant to be in South America. Number three, that it is fake news. And number four, are the traffickers swimming between St. Vincent and other countries? What we have to appreciate with the legal definition of human trafficking, the legal definition has a comma in between the various words. It could include recruiting, transporting, transferring, harboring, enticing. It does not require transportation to be there in every circumstance. There may be instances where a person recruited, that indeed would be trafficking, or transferred, or harbored. And that is what people have to understand. Unfortunately, the people who commented under the article did not go off to look at the definition of human trafficking, because if they did, they would understand that there is no fake news. The reality is that a person can be trafficked without even leaving their home country. In fact, domestic trafficking is a huge issue globally. In the UK, the vast majority of trafficking victims are from the UK. In the US, the vast majority of trafficking victims are from the US. Think about it logically. Myself and yourself, we would resemble each other in the sense of our features, our ethnicity. We both have Caribbean features. If we were in China, God forbid, and we were trafficked in China, we would stand out like a sore thumb. Therefore, it is logical that a trafficker will traffic somebody who can fit in. We have students who are being trafficked and go home at night. We have girls in foster care system. We have girls and boys who are staying in a care home who are often being trafficked because of their vulnerabilities. We need to accept and appreciate immigration is not a requirement. I recently shared with somebody about domestic trafficking. I did not call it domestic trafficking, but I gave an example. You could be born in Kingstown, live in Kingstown, and be trafficked in Kingstown. If your mother or father is your pimp, you don't even have to leave your bedroom to be trafficked. Let me go one step further. Your mother may be in a relationship with a man. That could be her boyfriend, her sugar daddy, her partner. What I can say to you, if that mother allows her daughter to engage sexually, her daughter is underage, to engage sexually with this partner in exchange for something of value, utility bills, cell phone data, food, groceries, all the like, money, anything of value, that indeed can constitute human trafficking. And when I shared that with somebody recently, they said, you are stretching the definition. The definition does not need to be stretched. In fact, I told them in the US, cases such like that are indeed convicted and charged when the evidence comes out to substantiate this is happening. In fact, in Trinidad, there was a case of a young girl. I remember reaching out to various people in media, and they did not recall the case. I did some research, I was able to find it. If I recall correctly, she was on Facebook, she made a video and was crying, and said that her mother was selling her, I believe, in the vicinity of Arapata Avenue to men. This girl was being prostituted. The best way to look at human trafficking, when a person is a minor, they are under the age of sexual consent, when they are being used sexually for the purposes of money or something of value, that is indeed likely to be trafficking. There is no such thing as a child prostitute, so I will not use such a term. But if we consider prostitution as a term and consider the person being a minor, that indeed is most likely human trafficking. And that's what we have to accept and realize. When I travel in Trinidad and Tobago and here in Simonton and the Grenadines, people tell me of stories of women they know whose daughter is promiscuous, whose daughter is sleeping with multiple men. I will also tell you that I have heard that in Union, there are girls who actually get taken to Miro for the purpose of having sex. Again, child prostitution doesn't exist, but these girls are prostituted. And I'm going to go one step further and say that there are girls who have gone missing for months. And I'm saying all of this based on facts and testimonies of individuals who have been exploited, trafficked, or abused. And I can tell you that one girl went missing for 3 months, and that is because when she returned, she disclosed that she had been with a yachty. A yachty is one of these foreign men on yachts. There are girls in Union and Miro, and likewise in other parts of the Grenadines, I'm sure, and mainland, who engage in sexual activity with foreign men on their yachts. When these girls are minors, this is most likely trafficking.
Okay, so that definition really has blown my mind. Because generally when you spoke of, you mentioned those, probably leaving their homes for months or even weeks at a time. And generally we are in a culture that would say, oh, she's being disobedient to her parents, or she gone to look for man, that kind of way, or she her foot hot. That is what they would generally say. They won't necessarily pin it on she is being trafficked or that child is being trafficked. So you're basically saying to me that, if that child is with somebody else, and perhaps the parents, perhaps the mother, perhaps, it was a consent, well, the mother arranged it because of maybe poverty or whatever situation in the home, that too is human trafficking. Is that what you're saying to me?
Absolutely, and that is what we have to realize and appreciate. And I want to go one step further to explain cyber sex trafficking. In the Philippines, the age of sexual consent is 12. A lot is being done to change that age from 12, but the Philippines is the youngest in the world. As a result of that, in my personal opinion, that explains why cyber sex trafficking is so high in the Philippines. In addition, in the Philippines, they speak English. That is very much their second language. And as a result of that, it is very easy for an individual to sexually exploit a person through the internet when they speak the same language. Cyber sex trafficking in the Philippines is where boys and girls are being sexually abused by brother, father, mother, sister, auntie, uncle. There are times when the parents have no idea. A Western man, usually in Australia, New Zealand, Korea, the US, UK, offers to teach that son or daughter, niece or nephew, to learn English for a certain amount of money per week. The parents agreed to this proposition. However, what they do not realize is instead of that child being taught English, that child is being sexually abused by a webcam. This Western man, often Western, is in his home and he will direct play by play the sexual abuse he wants to see take place live. Cyber sex trafficking is exactly what it sounds. It is abuse via the internet. Now, what you have to appreciate, this Western man is not in the Philippines. However, he is trafficking these children. In the same way, if that can happen in the Philippines, that means an individual in St. Vincent and the Grenadines can be trafficked in their home simply by having the access to a cell phone or computer device with Wi-Fi connectivity. And that is what we need to realize and appreciate. It does not require immigration. It does not require movement. Simply having a laptop computer, performing sexual acts, being directed to do so, cyber sex trafficking. There are even cases that I have read about where parents set up security cameras in their basement, sexually abuse their children. One case was of a 6-month-old daughter being sexually abused under the basement by her parents. That was cyber sex trafficking. So we need to appreciate and understand that trafficking comes in different forms. And in an example where the mother is allowing her daughter to be used by yachties or by the boyfriend or sugar daddy, that mother would be the child's pimp. Yes, that's exactly what it is. People are not used to hearing the word pimp when it comes to mother, but this is the reality. And it is not just an Asian problem. The lockdown means we are now all doing everything online. And when we have websites like OnlyFans, this is a platform for even young people to use to sell photos and videos, sexual imagery, because we have peers who can also traffic one another. Cyber sex trafficking can be done by 2 teenagers who are taking sexually exploitative photographs of one another and selling that on the internet.
Okay. You mentioned due to the lockdown. And as a matter of fact, when I was preparing for this program, I had several teachers say to me, is human trafficking a thing in St. Vincent? But based on what you're saying, you know, it can actually be happening under our nose and we are not even aware of it. So my question to you is, based on our remote learning and the fact that children are now at home and not necessarily in schools, what can teachers do? Or how can teachers be aware? What are some things that teachers can be aware of in light of, okay, human trafficking, like children, vulnerable children? Who are these children? How do we identify them?
What I think is important to note first and foremost is that you need to be able to identify vulnerabilities. And so you've just made a very good point about how can we identify and what are the vulnerabilities that we're looking for. What we have to appreciate, a person who has been a victim of childhood sexual abuse is most vulnerable to being exploited. When we understand that, then that enables us to be able to identify these children because we know of their past case and history, and therefore provide them with the support that enables them to not fall into the lure of human trafficking. We've also got to appreciate vulnerabilities is not just about poverty. We talk about poverty a lot, but besides that, vulnerabilities can include being a refugee, being an immigrant, not speaking the language, mental or physical disability, your gender, LGBT community. Vulnerability is not just about poverty. Every one of us has vulnerabilities. If you are a victim of abuse in your childhood, victim of domestic violence, when a child has any of those vulnerabilities, that straight away means that you need to be on the alert to be able to provide them the support that they need. The next thing you have to understand too is that when a child has been abused and therefore is vulnerable to being trafficked, they may have certain signs and identifiers. With small children, it includes regressive behavior, sucking the thumb, wet in the bed. With older children, it can include obesity, insomnia, HIV, AIDS, STDs, uncomfortable getting undressed in front of you. Let's say that it is time for gym class and it is the group of girls in the changing room, and one of those girls is very uncomfortable getting undressed? What about a person with low self-esteem, with an eating disorder, a person who excessively baths, doesn't bath at all, a person who is very tired all the time, not necessarily because of insomnia, but they're staying up late, if I can use the term, servicing clients. Of course, I do not consider them to be clients. I consider prostitution to be paid rape, and these men are rapists. You've also got to consider if a person is displaying promiscuous behavior. What about anger issues? When a child is badly behaved, is mischievous, disrespectful, dishonest, lies or steals, often parents and teachers who use corporal punishment will try to beat that behavior out of them. But in fact, that is not useful. Instead, you need to understand the root cause of why they are behaving in that way. Because when you can scratch beneath the surface, you'll be able to work out that is just their cry for help. They are trying to get your attention. When you exclude a student, you have not solved their problems. You have not got to the root of why they are behaving in that way. What you have to realize, people get triggered by different things according to their experiences. Anger is a big one. I know a lot of survivors who have anger issues. That is because of the abuse they have gone through. Even for myself, as a survivor of abuse, I used to wet the bed as a child. I had few friends. I had anger issues, insomnia, low self-esteem. Even as an adult, I still suffer with some of these things today. When a person has sleep issues, for example, instead of telling them to drink chamomile tea, Horlicks, or Milo, ask yourself mentally why. The reason that I have sleep problems is because I was sexually abused during my sleep. For other survivors, they too were abused in their sleep, or flashbacks, nightmares, or one survivor I know of in the Caribbean, I believe in SVG, she struggles to sleep at night for fear her baby daughter will also be abused. She's a teenage mother who was abused, gave birth to a child, and due to fear, she struggles to sleep. There was some young boys in the fishing community in the Philippines 20, 30 years ago. A group of filmmakers came out to the Philippines to make a film. One of these filmmakers decided to stick around. He stayed and was there for a number of years after. Some of these young boys from the fishing community would go to school and they would fall asleep at their desk. That is because they were being sexually exploited by this man who had stuck around from the West to sexually abuse these boys. The fact of the matter is, if you look at a list of signs and identifiers in abuse victims or trafficking victims, you can very easily identify a survivor of abuse or a survivor of trafficking. For myself, if you look at the list, I no longer wet the bed. I got to point it out. I don't wet the bed anymore. But if you look at the list, I would tick maybe 20 out of 30. And that's what you have to realize. Unfortunately, when we've been abused, there are often a lot of similarities between victims and survivors. And that is how pimps and traffickers can identify us to exploit us. And that is what we have to realize. Any survivor, particularly of sexual abuse in their childhood, is very much at risk to being trafficked.
Okay. We are in a culture where a lot of what you're saying is taboo. It's not spoken of freely, generally. Sometimes it's swept under the rug. Families keep it under lock and key because you don't want your child exposed to negative comments from others, or negative comments from villagers, or from teachers, or from society in general. How do we get past that to the stage where we can safely prevent or limit human trafficking among our young and vulnerable students?
I think it's important for us to appreciate that any person could indeed be susceptible to this. In addition to that, we have to allow free conversation between one another. We need to understand the issue first and foremost. And beyond that, we need to have systems in place to be able to provide support to survivors. It is very difficult for a person to disclose and open up about something that they've been through because of fear of being stigmatized, of being blamed, the shame. However, when the support is in place for that individual, that can change the dynamics. Unfortunately, in the Caribbean, we often don't take things very seriously. We sweep it under the carpet. And that is one of the issues. When a person has been abused or exploited, the reality is often they are disbelieved. We need to change the dynamics where when a disclosure takes place, the response is immediate. That disclosure is dealt with appropriately. There was even the case, for example, of Anwar Jack. Anwar Jack is currently in prison. The last time I read the article, it stated 31 years incarceration for taking the life of a spiritual Baptist pastor. Anwar Jack had been drugged, sodomized, and raped by this pastor, who manipulated and groomed him to the point that Jack eventually went along with it. I guess he was coerced into engaging in this homosexual lifestyle with the bishop. From reading the article some weeks ago, it came to my attention that there was a possibility that Jack was exploited. And I'm referring to and mention in the article that a third party was involved. What you have to accept is that trafficking does not look like a textbook. It comes in different ways. Jack was afraid to speak out because he had been told, nobody will believe you. And that is the problem. When a person is an integral member of society, we as people are unwilling to believe that they could have done that. I believe if we hear something, we need to respond immediately. In subway stations in New York, we see signboards. If you see something, say something. That is in reference to bombs. However, I believe when it comes to abuse and exploitation, we need to speak out. We need to stop finger pointing and blaming the victim. Unfortunately, the reality is we often feel that young person, that child, or even adult, they had some reason to blame. They have some form of accountability. The wider variety, the wider society will then go on to blame the parents, the upbringing. We have to realize and appreciate any person can be abused, exploited, or trafficked on the basis of vulnerabilities. We need to be able to have dialogues and conversations to understand this, to know how to respond, to know how to identify. Being able to identify a victim or survivor is first and foremost, but the next thing to do is to respond appropriately by informing the authorities. The following thing to do is to ensure that that child is safeguarded, because there will be a pushback, particularly when that person has a high status, such as this bishop. I do not believe in an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but in that situation, Jack Anwar felt his only means of escape was to take a life. There are individuals, truth be told, who will sexually exploit another person's daughter or son, but if you lay a finger to their son or daughter, they will kill you. This doesn't make sense. And that is the reality. There are people who care and concern for their own family members, but perpetrate an offense against another. We need to have a community of people who are willing to speak up and speak out. Even if that is done anonymously, I feel it is important that we be a voice for the voiceless. It is such a cliche term, but it is so true. When you know about a young girl going to Miro, engaging in sexual activity, don't just tell Ms. Headley, do something about it, report it. We cannot sit there and say the police are corrupt. In every country in the world, there are good police and bad police. Not every police officer is corrupt, so we need to move on from that. We need to accept the reality that there are people who do want to crack down on this issue. There are people who want to make a difference, to protect and safeguard, and beyond that, to be able to support that family network so that they too can receive the help that they need in being able to assist that child on the steps towards healing.
Okay. You are listening to NBC Radio 705. You are listening to Teachers Talk. To call in, the number is 457-2705, and I'm speaking to Miss Juanita Headley, and we are talking about this mouth-filling, thought-provoking topic, human trafficking. She has literally blown in my mind what was human trafficking. I did not even realize that human trafficking could happen domestically, and it could happen right here in St. Vincent, and probably is happening right here in St. Vincent. Miss Headley, you wrote a book called Can You Keep a Secret? What prompted you? I heard you mentioning before that you were abused growing up. Did that prompt you to write this book, or was it something completely different?
Truth be told, the idea of the book came out of an interview that I had at Trinity TV Network, a Catholic station in Trinidad and Tobago. For around the last 5 years, I have been traveling to Trinidad and Tobago. This January would have made 6 years I have been doing this type of work on human trafficking and child abuse prevention. The co-panelists there asked me the question, Juanita, can you explain, can you tell a secret? And I corrected him and said, it's can you keep a secret? From that day forward, every single opportunity I had to talk about can you keep a secret, I did that. But the same night of that interview, some few years ago, I decided I need to write a book on this topic. I came home and I started writing my book. Within 1 month, I had written close to 400 pages. My book aims to educate, empower, edify, and inspire people. It shares my own personal testimony and story about becoming a public speaker. It talks about my experience of being abused. And because it was written in Trinidad, it has a lot of Trinidad influence in there. But I believe it is applicable to everybody around the world. My book, I am convinced, will truly change lives. I believe every one of us has a calling. Every one of us has a purpose. I am convinced that what the enemy intended for evil, God intends for good. And although I was a victim of abuse, I am now a survivor. For me, I asked the question in my childhood to my grandfather and my aunt, can you keep a secret? They responded, it depends. As a result of their response, I walked away. A few weeks or months later, I asked the same question. They said it depends. My granddad would say things like, well, it depends what you tell me. I may have to tell your grandma. My grandma is from Jamaica. She's very much into corporal punishment. I was very fearful of her. As a result of the fear, I went to my grandfather, who was more softer. Despite that, because I had been abused and the shame that is attached to that, I had fear. Fear is false evidence appearing real. I was sexually abused in my sleep from 4 to 10. My stepfather never threatened me into silence. He abused me whilst I was sleeping. And I would toss and turn and fight him off. I would pretend I'm tossing and turning. I will say to you that vocalizing and speaking about it as a child was very difficult. It is very uncomfortable to talk about being abused, about being sexually violated, because often we do not have the correct terminology. Some children are told, this is your cookie, pumpkin, butterfly, banana, cherry. For me, my mother told me, nobody should touch your private parts. When she told me that, I understood exactly that these are my private parts. Nobody should touch them. My stepfather groomed me. Grooming is preparation. My stepfather started by tickling me. His hand slipped. He then progressed on to abusing me in my sleep. When I was 10, he paused the abuse when I was 10. My therapist used the term paused. Why paused? Because a number of years later, he asked me to engage sexually with him. He lifted up his trousers and asked me to put my hands down his trousers. I had the strength and courage to say no and walk away. Although I had been abused at a young age, I did not understand, but I walked away. Many victims and survivors of abuse do not have that courage and confidence. We call them promiscuous. It is simply a learned behavior because you have been groomed. Then a number of years later, when I was around 15, my stepfather showed me a pornographic video he had made with himself and my mother. I believe that was to groom me as a teenager. It was paused when I was 10, but at 15, he made a pornographic video with my mother, and I believe that was the purpose of trying to start things up again. My book, Can You Keep a Secret? My t-shirts, my tagline, my slogan, my book trailer, and the song, the ringtone on my phone, Can You Keep a Secret, is important. I want the laws around the world to change. Whatever job you have, working with children, working with vulnerable people, the laws, in my opinion, need to change. That when somebody asks you the question, can you keep a secret, you respond with the words yes. Once you have heard the secret, you tell the child, because of what you've told me, I need to phone the police. You then phone the police thereafter. A lot of people, particularly over the age of 18, do not understand this. Recently, I asked somebody the question, can you keep a secret? And they said, no, it's dangerous. They are a teacher, so they had on the teacher hat. I said to them, but you are not teaching at this particular moment in time. When you are in school, follow the laws of that country and follow the laws of the school. But outside of school, you need to respond yes. You are not keeping secrets. When I went to my grandfather and my aunt, I did not want my stepfather to continue to try to rape me. I wanted to be rescued. I asked the question, can you keep a secret? So when they said yes, I would confide in them and they would rescue me. People come up to me all the time and ask me, can you keep a secret? Can you keep a secret? There are professional men in your country who were sexually abused in their childhood. They told me their parents have no idea. Their friends have no idea. Why did they tell me? Because I have been there, because I understand the situation. And so I want people to understand very clearly, follow the laws of your country, follow the laws in your profession. But when somebody comes up to you and asks you that question, can you keep a secret? Respond yes to hear the secret. You are not keeping secrets. Respond yes. When they confide in you, communicate your next steps to them first and then do it. Do not run off and tell the police. Communicate first to that child, that young person or adult. Communicate your steps. Go off and do it. Because truth be told, they may be angry at you now, but in 10, 20, 30 years, they will come back and thank you for rescuing them.
Why is it so important that you communicate your next steps to that person?
One of the fundamental questions people always ask me when they don't understand the concept is trust issues. Let me give you an example. I'm going to change the facts of the story. I was in the Philippines. Let's say I was at a school. The teacher is Lizel. One of the students is a boy, John Mark. He says to me, Juanita, I have cigarettes, for example. I said to Lizel, can you keep a secret? She said yes. I told her, John Mark has cigarettes. What did she do? She reported this to the principal. As a result of that, all of the boys in this school hated me, refused to talk to me. The relationship had broken down. They would never, ever speak to me. I would see them and greet them. They ignored me and stonewalled. When I came back and asked Lizel, why did you do that? I had to tell the principal. I can tell you, I loved her dearly. She had a wonderful son, beautiful, cute, really respectful little boy. I loved her and her son. They were wonderful. I would never on this earth trust her again. Why? She went behind my back. Instead, she should have come to me first. Miss Headley, what you've told me, I need to go to the principal. And I would have said to her, don't do that. Wait until June 16 when I leave, and then you can communicate. Likewise, when it comes to abuse, when you run behind that person's back and tell the police, they will most likely deny that, number one. Number two, you have created trust issues. They will never trust you again. However, if you communicate to them first of all, then the person knows the next steps and you support them along the journey. I am not telling you to say yes and run off behind people's back. No. The second thing I need to point out, when the child has asked you, can you keep a secret? And you have said yes with your mouth, but it depends with your head. When the child tells you their secret, you communicate your next steps and you phone the police. Do not phone the accused and say, your stepdaughter Juanita said you abused her. Call the police. There is a particular procedure and protocol to reduce the chances of trust issues and to ensure that that child is ready to respond when the police investigate, rather than recanting that allegation when the police turn up.
Okay. One of the things that we often struggle with is, well, as teachers, as adults, is that when a child comes with a story, we often try to struggle with whether or not that story is plausible, it's true, if it's a figment of the child's imagination. I think sometimes we just can't imagine, or we cannot see how somebody can do a child, abuse a child, exploit a child. And in essence, some children are called liars as a result of that. Maybe they are called liars because in the case of a mother, the mother perhaps does not want to lose the economic benefit that the said person is providing to the home, or maybe because of the person's status in society, many different reasons that children are not believed when they come or when they speak their truth. What impact does that actually have on children, and how can we get past that stage?
What I think is important to note that sometimes people lie. That is the reality. Sometimes people lie. But I think you need to go into this with an open mind. Think about Jack Anwar and the priest, the pastor, whichever title you want to give him, who's now deceased. People would never have expected him to have done that. Perpetrators of abuse, exploitation, and trafficking are often very charismatic. They look just like me and you. They are male and female, young and old. What I feel is important, when a disclosure of abuse or exploitation comes to the surface, no matter who the allegation is about, you need to believe the child. You need to allow the police to investigate. If that child is lying, that will come out. We have DNA. We have enough ways to investigate thoroughly. Yes, we know that sometimes innocent people go to jail, absolutely. But the point is there are many ways to be able to substantiate if that is true or not. Rather than going in and saying, well, maybe they're lying, they're watching porn, go in, believe in the child, allow the police to investigate. If that child is lying, the police are going to have a very serious word with that child. And we also need to get to the roots of why that child would have lied in the first place. But if a child does disclose, believe them first. The next thing you need to do is to stay calm. No matter who the person is, stay calm. God forbid your daughter or son says to you that your husband or wife has sexually abused them. Let's say you're unmarried. Your daughter, child, niece, nephew says that your partner, your fiance, has sexually abused them. When I ask people this question in my Zooms, I have Zooms every Thursday. I had one just today. When I ask people this question, often their response is, I will ask my husband. Wrong on all counts. Do not ask the accused. Let the police do that. You need to allow the police to investigate. The disclosure has come out. Believe the child. Stay calm. Be transparent about what you can and cannot do. Do not overpromise something you cannot do. Beyond that, don't investigate. Don't start to ask questions. This causes issues when it comes to evidence. Allow the police to do their job. It does not matter who the person may be in your life. Accusations are made. Let the police substantiate if that is true or not. Even recently, we had the case of Ravi Zacharias, deceased. He was around 74 years of age. He died last year. Ravi Zacharias is a Christian apologetic, or was a Christian apologetic, who has a massive worldwide ministry. And Ravi Zacharias has actually been accused of abusing a woman over the age of sexual consent, which he denied. But upon his death, evidence has been uncovered that he was sexually abusing, raping, and violating women around the world. That has been a huge hit to the Christian community. But we need to accept that we are human first, and if we are Christian, Christian second. Any person can be a victim. Any person can be a survivor. Let us not come with our prejudgments. Allow the police to do their job. But we need to first and foremost believe the child, communicate to that child, and allow that child to be able to have the support they need. If that is a lie, we need to uncover why, get to the root cause, so that that child can get the help and the healing.
All right, thank you. Juanita, are there any words you would like to, anything you would like to say to teachers, specifically seeing that we deal with children on a daily basis, to the general public, secondly, in terms of human trafficking and, how do we get past our own taboos and different social cues or social isms and schisms? What would you like to say to us as teachers and to the general public?
What I would say, as it says in the Bible, people perish for lack of knowledge. Knowledge is power. We, as people, need to be educated. I have Zooms every Thursday. Before today's interview with yourself, I was in a Zoom. 5 to 7:30 p.m., I have a Zoom every single Thursday. I have podcasts. I do a program on Monday. People need to be educated on this topic so that they can better understand the issue, better identify victims, survivors, and perpetrators. On the back of that, we need to listen, not just with our ears, but with our eyes. Often victims, survivors communicate, but not with words. We need to respond affirmatively. In school, if you're a social worker, maybe the laws of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you cannot say yes, but I'm sure there are other ways you can coax the information out of the child. On the back of that, you need to be open to receive whatever the child says. They may say something to shock you. They may just want to see how you're going to respond and react. People ask me very strange things, tell me very bizarre stuff. They are testing me. Children will test you. Make yourself available. Patience is a virtue. So many of us lack patience. When it comes to young people, you need to be patient. When you're seeing certain behaviors, do not beat it out of them. When your child is addicted to pornography or masturbation, even at 3 years of age, get to the root cause. Knowledge is power. Listen to your children. Do not be naive and ask your son and daughter tonight, have you been abused? They're going to deny it. I denied it. You need to scratch beneath the surface by asking different kinds of questions. Observe their behavior. Maybe put on a documentary about abuse and ask them questions. Maybe invite them to one of my Zooms and see how they respond and react to things. The fact is, incest and abuse is an issue everywhere in the world, especially in the Caribbean, where we like to cover it up. When we have abuse and incest, those victims and survivors are at great risk of human trafficking. But if you don't have the knowledge, you cannot identify victims and survivors. We, victims, survivors, need help. We need therapy. We need counseling. We need support. Enable the people in your world to get the support to be healthy and whole by deciphering their behaviors, understanding it, supporting them, and taking them on that journey to healing and hope.
Well, Juanita, it's almost time for us to wrap up, basically. So I'm just going to give you the floor to say any final words you wish to say before I wrap up.
Most certainly, and thank you very much. A few things I want to say. Try to remember all my pointers. I've written them down. The first thing I want to say, and this is important, and it's something that I was sharing today, actually. When you hear an allegation, no matter who the allegation is from, what you need to do is you need to inform the authorities. It is that simple. It does not matter who the allegation is about, male or female, young or old. Whenever you hear any allegation of any criminal offense, inform the authorities immediately. That is first and foremost. The second thing I want to say is that when we hear things, I'm talking about hearsay. When we hear things, there is a way to respond to what we hear. So I want to encourage everyone who's listening in, Christian and non-Christian, if you are ever told something about a person that is not criminal in nature, I'm referring to gossip. If you ever hear something about a person that is not criminal in nature, you need to confront the person. If you hear something that is criminal, go straight to the authorities. If you hear something that is not criminal, such as gossip, go to the person directly and communicate to them. For those of you who adhere to the Bible, it says in Matthew 18:15-7, if your brother does something wrong to you, go to him, talk to him, and tell him what he has done. If he does not listen, bring a friend. If he doesn't listen, bring a pastor. Even at work, there is a protocol. If you have a problem with a colleague or a coworker, the first thing you need to do, go to them directly, then a supervisor, and then the CEO. When I say recently, a number of years ago, I sued an employer. And when I went to court, they asked me, did you go to your employer first? And the answer was no. Unfortunately, in small islands, we love to create bacchanal, confusion, gossip, slander. Even in the days of the Bible, Jesus was slandered. False accusations spread like wildfire. Why? Because we have never given that person the benefit of the doubt. What is really important, when you hear something, instead of going around and asking other people, what's your opinion about this? Do you think it's true? Go directly to the source. If we could do that, I believe things would be very, very different. There are so many amazing people doing amazing work whose reputation is destroyed on the basis of rumors and false accusations. But I must reiterate, if you hear anything that is criminal in nature, you need to go to the authorities. That's what I want to be clear about. If you hear an accusation of sexual abuse by a bishop of a spiritual Baptist church, you go to the authorities. Do not go to that bishop. And I'm referring to the Jack Anwar case. If you heard, for example, that that bishop is selfish, go to him directly. Do not go and gossip that. Do not go and ask people. Because unfortunately, when we do that, there are people whose reputation will be destroyed on the basis of rumors. And of course, like I said earlier, when it comes to something of a sexual nature, something of a criminal nature, the police have been trained well enough to be able to investigate whether or not this indeed has happened or has not happened. But I want to reiterate, it's right in the Bible. If you have a problem with a person, go to them directly. Because it's unfortunate, there are so many people in the world whose ministries will be destroyed and sabotaged on the basis of something that isn't true. Let's think about Ravi Zacharias. Ravi Zacharias stood there and said, I did not abuse this woman. Now that he is deceased, the evidence has come out. As it says in the Bible, what is done in the dark will come out in the light. By their fruit you will know them. Unfortunately, we misuse that scripture. There are people in the world who we will see their fruit and not know what they do behind closed doors. Jack Anwar and this pastor is a prime example. Pillar of the community, had a great job. The Bible says by their fruit, which is true. But even knowing a person's fruit, when it is criminal, you must go to the authorities. When it is not criminal, go to the person directly. And that is important. Because even for me, I'm doing a lot of work pro bono, 9 years of my life, trying to spread this message. But the reality is that pimps, traffickers, pedophiles do not want this message to be out there. When I can educate and empower the nation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that means your children will be safeguarded. So unfortunately, wherever I take this work, there will be people who may slander me or lie about me, spread malicious rumors. But no matter how much people may try and attack my reputation, I will continue to do my work because this is an important mission. So I want to reiterate, even if people have questions for me, I will never disclose my age, but if somebody has a question, don't gossip me, do not slander me, do not backbite, ask me directly. On the back of that, I have my book, Can You Keep a Secret? My book is available at Games Book Center. I have Zooms every Thursday from 5 to 7:30. On Mondays from 1 to 2 p.m., I have a program on Gem FM. Tuesdays and Wednesdays every week, I have podcasts talking on this topic. For people to get a copy of my book, my t-shirt, the book and t-shirt, 70 EC each, because 70% of the profits will be used to build safe houses in the Philippines for victims of human trafficking. So if they would like to get a copy of my book, to attend my Zoom, to receive information on this topic, to receive trainings, to be better educated and empowered, I will encourage them to reach out to me, 454-1693, 454-1693. That is my WhatsApp number, my Facebook name, Changing Cases. Changing, C-A-S-E-S, my website, changingcases.org. Again, my number, 454-1693. I, of course, take donations. I'm a volunteer lawyer. they may be in kind, etc. I'm trying to get my book printed so that it'll be available for the locust boat before they leave. So like I said, 454-1693. And one final thing in my last 30 seconds.
Thank you, Ms. Headley. I need to wrap up now. I just want to thank you for joining us tonight. And you have been listening to Teachers Talk. I wish you guys all the best. Thank you for tuning in. And God bless. Good night. And please get in contact with Ms. Headley if you want to find out more information about human trafficking. Good night.
Connect with NBC Radio on Facebook at facebook.com/NBCSVG or WhatsApp 457-2705. The sound of the nation, reaching you in every possible way.